why this business? Why did you want to get into nuclear?
5 years ago, I set out to solve a problem. Carbon had been increasing. Access to clean energy is becoming difficult across parts of the world, and now we even see the problems with energy security as well. And so I founded the Energy Impact Center, first just a research institute, to take a first principles look at our climate and energy problems across the globe. Our investigation, our interviewing subject matter experts across the country, across academia, across industry, across policymakers, led us to understanding that nuclear was the solution, and it had just become stagnant for unobvious reasons. And so we set out for even more research and more interviews and more investigation to figure out why that was.
I'm here today with Bret Kugelmass, the founder and CEO of Last Energy, and we are here in what's called a mechanical prototype of your first small nuclear reactor. This is very exciting. This building is, what's the size of the building that we're in now?
It's a cube that's 30 feet by 30 feet by 30 feet.
Okay, and within this cube is housed Last Energy's new nuclear reactor. So this is kind of amazing, but we've reached the point in the world where we're really starting to think about the future of new nuclear, advanced reactors. And so Last Energy is working to commercialize this future, but you're doing it in a very different way. So what I'd like to get into is the story of Last Energy and what you're doing that's so different from some of the other companies like GE, Hitachi, and Toshiba and Westinghouse that are trying to build enormous new power plants. Tell me what you're working on.
So what we've taken is the standard pressurized water reactor technology. It's the workhorse of the industry, 300 power plants around the world, 10% of humankind's electricity is produced from this power source. And we have productized it, miniaturized it, and modularized it in order to make it a manufacturable product, in order to bring the cost down and increase the scalability of nuclear energy production across the world.
Okay, so in recent months we've seen some big breakthroughs announced in fusion technology. So nuclear fusion had a big day in late 2022. This was newfangled, new stuff that no one had ever accomplished before. Tell me what's new about your technique.
Yeah, we're innovative in the way that we are not actually introducing any new physics, any new chemistry, any new material science. It's a very different approach towards energy technology innovation. We spent years trying to study what makes new energy systems work, what makes new technology work. And what we found over and over again is if you change too many variables all at the same time, back to that physics or the chemistry or material science, if you deviate from the standard supply chain, you find yourself in a position where every component is 10 times as expensive and you don't actually make any headway on cost reduction.
Our core design principle is use standardized equipment, off the shelf, one might say, in order to benefit from the experience of so many other industries before us.
So all of the skill set is already here. These guys are accustomed to building huge equipment for the oil and gas industry. And
Yep.
that fits your needs perfectly.
Exactly. So we don't even have to invest in our own facilities to get started. We don't have that huge upfront capital cost. Rather, we get to benefit from already existing facilities and use a contract manufacturing process in order to get off the ground years ahead of schedule.
The kind of vessels that they're manufacturing here, these are very common for the oil and gas industry. How is it that you can use the same types of equipment for nuclear?
Yeah, one of the benefits that we brought about in designing our system initially was to base everything off of the existing oil and gas supply chain. So the oil and gas industry is already used to dealing with high pressure systems, high flow rates of water, pressure vessels, flanges, pipes, you name it. And so by utilizing not only the existing supply chain, but also their existing facilities and the labor force and the expertise were able to hit the ground running without having to reinvent the wheel.
Fusion, even if they've made breakthroughs, it could take another 10 or 20 years to test out all the new parts and get to the point where it's economically viable, right? Your plan was to not have anything new, just to use the oldest possible technology that's been proven. And so why should people care about last energy? Because you're putting it together in some new way?
It's a technology innovation from a systems integration perspective. Okay. We productized nuclear. The challenge with new physics innovations, it's not just the 10 years to get past the physics part and then another 10 years to get past the engineering part. The problem is if your materials, if your supply chain deviate from what's common and scaled across many other industries, you might never be economical.
Okay. So have you sold any of these yet?
So we probably had more commercial success than every other new nuclear startup combined just this last year.
Really?
We've ended up signing contracts throughout Eastern Europe and Poland, Romania, and now also in the UK as some of our early target markets. We have over 24 projects under development across Europe.
And you've accomplished this just as a startup. I mean, I was led to believe that new nuclear was going to be still years and years away, and that you would need only the biggest companies would be able to make it happen.
If you're trying to do too much,
okay.
If you're trying to reinvent components or technology, almost all of the nuclear startups start off with the perspective that there's something wrong with the reactor. Okay, well that takes thousands of people to solve the reactor problem. But if you just use the existing reactor technology, like you can see behind me here, then with just a 40-person company, you can make this type of commercial headway.
My understanding is that you don't have a PhD in nuclear science or anything. You're an entrepreneur. Your previous company involved using drones to study rooftops for insurance companies. How in the world did you go from that to this?
Yeah, so I have an educational background in mechanical engineering and then entrepreneurial experience in a hard tech company in Frontier Tech and building drone technology. But after selling that company in 2017 and wanting to focus on global scale challenges such as energy and climate, I took my time studying the industry, meeting with hundreds of experts first in climate, and then when realizing that nuclear was just totally misunderstood, totally under-leveraged, ended up taking thousands more subject matter expert interviews just in the nuclear sector alone.
And so the right problem was shrinking the enormous nuclear power plants that we have around the world into a more manageable size?
That was our solution. The problem that we discovered was construction complexity.
Okay. All right.
So just the time it takes, the interest accrued on your financing charges over that construction period, this ended up, we realized, historically leading to most of the cost of nuclear energy. And so that became the problem to solve, constructability, not reactor physics.
Okay, so problems have led people to think that nuclear is just not going to be affordable. What you found is that it can be very affordable if you shrink it all and use only these off-the-shelf parts?
Go small, go repeatable, and then build your way up to scale. Economies of many instead of the economies of size. That's our approach. I think people's perception of nuclear has definitely changed dramatically over the last few years, really understanding as we start to scale up these renewable systems, some of their shortcomings. The land consumption, material consumption, they themselves have a carbon footprint. And then when you layer all the environmental benefits of nuclear on top of the energy security benefits that we're seeing ever more present throughout Europe in today's day and age, nuclear is becoming the obvious choice, and I think both people and governments are coming around. I mean, we know they are because they came to us looking for solutions.
They came to you, in particular, these Eastern European countries, in part because after Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the shutoff of gas to Europe, they realized we need other solutions. We can't just dig more coal to make ends meet.
They always knew that there was an energy security threat. And we've been talking to many of these Eastern European countries, Romania and Poland, for many years. It was just with the war, it became real to everybody how serious a concern energy security was. So they were able to put their political support behind the projects that they always wanted to anyway, because energy security became a threat to the public, that the public was aware of as well. And so yes, within a month of the war breaking out in Ukraine, we got a call from the Prime Minister of Romania himself, came out, and he cleared room for 2 of our projects at the Mioveni research reactor site.
Now, when we look at some of the biggest obstacles to nuclear, we've got regulatory issues, financing issues. How are you going to pay for things? What's this going to cost anyway?
Yeah, so each one of these units costs us under $100 million to build, and it produces billions of dollars worth of electricity over its lifetime. The way that we have architected our business model is using what's common in the renewables industry known as a power purchase agreement. So what we do is we get our customer, usually a factory of some sort, whether it be aluminum or glass or cement, we get them to sign us up as their utility. They write us a contract saying, here's the price of power over this period of time. We then take that contract to the financial markets, to private equity infrastructure funds. They fund the capex of the facility, and then we both benefit from the electricity sales and the profits of it over time.
You said that that's the way that renewable energy has grown. Indeed, a factory is not going to own its own solar panels or wind turbines, right? They contract through that long-term power purchase agreement. How many years are we talking? 20 years, 30 years?
The contracts that we have in Poland right now are for a 24-year period.
So this is the mock-up, of course, but the plant would be operating for 24 years. Is that the average lifespan?
The plant's lifetime is 42 years. However, with these power purchase agreements, it's much more common for them to be 5, 10, or 20-year power purchase agreements. It
sounds to me like that would incentivize you in a different way than utility companies, perhaps. Because if I'm a big utility company building a nuclear power plant, I know that if I have cost overruns, I can just charge my ratepayers that money. I don't have to eat it myself. But if you're going to continue to own the plant, I mean, that must incentivize you to really keep the costs contained.
Us having ownership from concept through operation through decommissioning is the perfect alignment of incentives. It means that from the design itself, we're designing for affordable electricity, we're designing with decommissioning in mind, we're designing throughout the entire plant's, we've designed the system from the get-go to consider the entire plant's lifetime.
At the end of the lifetime of this plant, you're going to have a lot of nuclear waste, I imagine. That's a big concern of a lot of people. They're still skeptical about the safety of nuclear. How do you deal with that issue?
Most of the safety concerns are perception-based rather than resulting from the physical phenomena of the plant. Yes, it's radioactive, but it's not that radioactive after you shut it down. The heat dissipates very quickly. The radioactivity also, that's the magic of radioactivity. It magically disappears all on its own. And so within just a few months, iodine-131, which is the radionuclide that has a hazard to human health, all gone. Okay, so all of a sudden you've eliminated the health hazard within just a few months of waiting. Within 10 years, most of the heat is gone. And so we've designed our system, this exact same modular frame with decommissioning in mind, to be able to take it apart just as easily as you put it together and bring it to whatever waste storage facility or recycling center you want to bring it to. We've designed our reactor vessel itself to be like a battery cartridge. And we've designed the facility, this nuclear island, with extra battery slots. So every 6 years, we come in with a new battery cartridge, a fully fueled reactor vessel, drop it into place, plug it in, and run it for another 6 years. We do that same thing 7 times throughout the lifetime of the facility, and then we let it cool down, and then the whole facility can be packaged up.
So you don't have to remove the spent fuel rods, they just stay here the whole time?
That is one of the key differences in the operational paradigm between us and the standard technology. With the standard PWR technology, you open up the reactor vessel, you shuffle the fuel, you add new fuel. For us, we don't. We simply drop in a new battery cartridge, fully fueled.
What would be the biggest obstacles that you still have to overcome in order to get the first one of these operating?
Yeah, so we've checked off most of the boxes from everything from government approval to technology development. Manufacturability is what we're testing right here. But there are still steps along the way. This mechanical prototype will advance. We're going to test out the disassembly next, the transportability, and continue to make these design enhancements all serving our greater mission of scalable, easy to construct, reducing complexity to deliver the most affordable, clean power that you could imagine.
Okay, so each one of these units will produce how much electricity?
20 megawatts. It's about the size of a data center or a pulp and paper factory or an automotive manufacturer.
But a big, old school nuclear, those are how many megawatts? 1,000?
A gigawatt, yeah, 1,000 megawatts, so about the size of a 1,000,000-person city, whereas ours would serve a town about the size of 20,000 people.
But if I want more of them, you can build them in parallel?
And that's the other change in the operational paradigm. Another area that we're innovative is borrowing lessons learned from other industries. When you build a solar farm, you don't build one giant solar panel. You build the same solar panel over and over again, you stack them next to each other. The exact same with our micronuclear facilities. If you need 200 megawatts, we're going to install 10 identical 20 megawatt units right next to each other.
So like you were saying, it's counterintuitive. You might give up a little bit of efficiency because your units are smaller, but you're making that up in the ease of manufacturing and installation.
Exactly.
Since there's nothing really new here, what's Last Energy's intellectual property?
Well, there's still quite a bit of technical complexity. The systems integration, the modularization, the manufacturability, these are all incredible technical challenges to overcome. But the rule that we set for ourselves is no component level innovation, no new physics, no new chemistry, no new material science. Those are the sexy and the fun problems that people gravitate towards. Instead, we chose the still technical problems, but the boring ones.
Okay, so your intellectual property isn't how to put it all together and transport it to the other side of the world and how much electricity we get from nuclear. My understanding is there's something like 300 or 400 nuclear power plants around the world, and they put out roughly 400 or 500 gigawatts of power. Does that sound right?
This is what is just so incredible about nuclear technology. It's that for so little input, you get so much out of it.
Okay.
And so those 400 buildings around the world provide 10% of world electricity, 4% of all of our energy consumption as a global civilization. That's incredible from 400 buildings. The fact is that any society that has experienced a rapid decarbonization, whether you look at France or Sweden or South Korea or Ontario, anyone that's done a total decarbonization of their energy infrastructure in under a decade's time, it's always been nuclear.
They still rely on coal, especially in Poland and Romania. I think they get the majority of their electricity from coal still. So your initial customer base are companies that no longer want to rely on dirty coal power.
The factories that we serve in Poland specifically have two problems. The first is that, yes, their energy that they get is very expensive and very dirty. And the other is actually capacity, because it's not so easy to just string up new transmission lines. And so they want to grow their economy. They want to grow their industry, and they literally cannot get enough power to the factory. So what do? We ship over a bunch of shipping container-sized modules, put it right next to the factory, and we become their utility. Nuclear has yet again another very unique advantage, and it's called distributed baseload. The fact that you can perfectly match your power supply with your power demand, both in location and in time. If a city needs 400 megawatts of power, they can buy 20 of our 20 megawatt units and co-locate that with the city, so you don't even need transmission cabling at all. If they grow in terms of size, they can just add on another unit, so it's always perfectly matched.
And you don't think the citizens of that town should worry about having all those reactors right in the fields right next door?
I think part of the reason that some communities have grown skeptical or scared of nuclear is actually lack of exposure to it. And so by building these beautiful buildings and setting them up outside of town and inviting the community to come visit it, we're going to be changing the perception of nuclear as well.
I hope that's true. Once you've built a dozen of these in Eastern Europe, Do you think the NRC might just want to, rubber stamp it and say, this is good for the U.S. too?
I think after we've built a few of these in Eastern Europe, and Western Europe as well, we're going to see interest from around the entire world, and it's going to be a race to see who can get their hands on as many of these as soon as possible.
That'll be a good problem for you to have. Okay, how many of these do you think you could build over the next decade?
Our goal is to completely decarbonize Earth's energy production. Period. We want to make energy abundant and affordable because of the effects that it has for every other industry. I mean, if you think of data centers, or if you think of material production, if you think of all of the modern wonders of life, they all have energy as a root input to them. And so by us making energy cheaper, we're going to help fulfill the visions of every other industry as well. There's certainly some institutional inertia that has slowed down from a bureaucratic perspective the development of new nuclear installations in this country. It applies less to us because we're focused on Europe. And in Europe, we've had a lot of success working with the NRC equivalent regulators. So the ONR out in the UK, Chenecon in Romania, and the PAA in Poland have been great partners in helping us regulate and implement our nuclear technology abroad.
When you're talking tens of thousands of reactors, that seems like an awful lot of material, a lot of uranium and everything else. Is that going to be a limiting factor at all?
One of the beauties about a system as simple as ours, us not moving towards these radical new physics innovations that require new materials, is that our plant is essentially steel, copper, water, and uranium. All of some of the most abundant and available materials, especially in terms of the power production that they end up creating. There's more than enough from a material perspective for us to not only satisfy global energy demand, but for us to 10x it.
For wind turbines and solar panels, they need a lot of exotic materials, rare earth metals and stuff like that. You don't need any of those?
There is a challenge in these systems that require big magnets with some of these more exotic materials, but they also require steel and cement and other things too that are material concerns. The key is with nuclear, you get so much more for so much less input. And so for us to produce that exact same megawatt hour of energy as a renewable system, we'd be using between 100 and 1,000 times less material input.
For the same amount of electricity?
For the same amount of electricity produced. You're looking at a facility right now that can supply energy for 20,000 homes. If you were to think of all the solar panels you'd need, you'd have a great visual representation of just how much more material and land renewables require.
You have some competitors out there. Other companies have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and many more years to try to get through the regulatory process, and they don't really seem to be any further along than you, this guy who only got into the field 4 or 5 years ago. What are they missing? What do you attribute your success to so far? I mean, for sure, you haven't built this yet, but you've made some great progress.
One of our core theses is to always make sure that you're solving the right problem, not the fun one. And so we went around and we interviewed both people from industry, government, scientists, and former startups in the nuclear sector itself. And one thing that we realized was everyone was just so focused on redesigning the reactor. And come on, it's fun, especially if you're a nuclear physicist. That's what you're trained to do, redesign the reactor.
What do you mean, like new kinds of fuel or new configurations?
New fuel, new material science.
Fusion, everyone loves that. Yeah.
So fundamentally new physics as well.
Forbes, of course, we cover the world of billionaires. When it comes to fusion, I'm amazed at how many billionaires want to have a piece of one fusion development or another. It's like it's their pet rock right now. Do you have any billionaire backers yet?
I don't know if I should be speaking to the personal finances of our backers, but we've got an amazing cohort of investors and board members. All of our investors were former entrepreneurs and operators themselves. And yes, they've done extremely well over the years.
So what's 2023 going to hold for Last Energy? What are your milestones to reach this year?
Well, 2022 was incredible. Between getting head of state endorsements and selling dozens of units abroad, it was just like a whirlwind year. So now it's time to get to brass tacks, ramp up our manufacturing capabilities, and start actually serving these energy systems.
And your manufacturing is going to initially be done where?
Right here in Texas.
Right here in Texas. Yeah. Thanks a lot for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.